You might remember last week I talked about returning to a particular woodland. The same place 2 weeks in a row, Neil? Well, not quite. One was last week we were sort of skirting around woodland-based kind of, but this week we're actually in woodland, and there's an important distinction there. I took some advice, though, from today's amazing guest, because I had planned to return to the woodland that I'd referenced and taken some scouting pictures of last week. And I know you're going to find today's guest full of calm. You'll have a sense of calm and inspiration today. But I did check out where we're allowed to photograph, because you can't just wander into any woodland. No, you have to have permission. A lot of woodland seems to be private, and when I did as my guest today had suggested and checked a bit more thoroughly about where I wanted to go back to, one of them was across farmland and there was no footpath out to it. Some sort of proper mature small dense patch of woodland which I thought looked fascinating, and the other one is completely private, fenced off, roped off, and I think it belongs to an energy company. Anyway, it's private, I can't go there. So back to the drawing board. I find myself in woodland that I'm allowed to be in today. And this is beautiful, mature woodland. It really is. And I'm surrounded by these huge... I'm not very good with being able to just tell lengths. Is that, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 metre? Is it 60 metre? Possibly more. Mature trees that have been here for centuries. And that's where I find myself. I'm walking in woodland, as the famous song goes. Well, I think you'll find, Neil, that the song's Walking in Memphis by Mark Cohen. Oh, no, I'm sure it was woodland. Mark Cohen, Walking in Woodland. That one with a very raspy voice. So, yes, it is important we're walking in woodland, because today's guest is establishing himself as established actually, as one of the UK's foremost experts on woodland and woodland photography. And that's exciting because you hear all kinds of different photographers on this show. You hear conflict photographers, aviation photographers, fashion, portrait photographers, and your celebrity photographers, LA, yeah. But Simon Baxter, my guest, is somebody who's taught me in one conversation just how special life is on our own doorstep. And frankly, never mind woodland photography, he could just be our first meditative photographer. All will be revealed.
Today on the Photowalk.
There's lots of different forms of stimulus in terms of sight, smell, sound, but that's constantly shifting. So with every single step forward or step to the side, visually, aesthetically, everything's shifting all the time. It's chaotic. There's a lot to consume. So to try and make sense of that with the camera is quite a task, really. So it needs your undivided attention. So your thought processes start to shift away from the stresses of everyday life, away from pain. When something has such a profound effect and a positive impact upon your life, you become very emotionally invested into it.
If Carlsberg did Photowalk podcasts, a glancing reference for a fleeting mention of something later on in today's show. Certainly, today's cast is about the calm you can feel when making pictures. It's not a get-rich-quick show. No, it's a Photowalk show, which today meanders through calming woodlands. The only photography show like this in the podcast sphere, and you are a part of it, where we walk together just with our cameras, taking along your letters, your DMs and Facebook messages, which drive the show. Lots of thoughts, lots of creative insight, and then of course we have a special guest too, as you just heard. Also, we'll be hearing from former guests with snippets of inspiration today. Finn Beals on turning your app off and breathing the world once again. Matt Searles on the most beautiful mail run in the world with a camera. And Gabrielle Matola on learning to accept no when out on the street. And what do your mails touch on? Well, I shall tell you in a moment. First of all, though, I'd like you to think about change, because we're supported by our friends at mpb.com, the number one platform in the UK, the US and Europe, with bases in Brighton and Brooklyn and Berlin when it comes to buying, trading and selling quality used kit online. It's true that a picture, a moment, can change the way we feel. We talk about this so often in the show. It changes how we see ourselves. It can change our understanding. It can change the rules. It can provoke and change history, as we said before. mpb.com puts photo and video kit into more hands more sustainably, helping you to change your kit to tell your stories. Every month, visual storytellers, just like you, sell more than 20,000 cameras and lenses to MPB, which means that you can choose used and get affordable access to stuff that doesn't cost the earth, and in some cases, you'd never dream that you'd one day own. So sell the kit you're not using, trade it in for the kit that you need to create. Buy used, spend less, and get more. Go to mpb.com. We're also supported, handheld and produced because our patrons help guide the direction of this show by those who subscribe to the Patreon channel, which from the price of one high street coffee per month is helping to build this show so it can continue in its mission to become a super diverse community of photographers from every interest, every genre and every level of competence. So we'll talk about that later on. Right, today our guest is woodland photographer Simon Baxter. Split into two chapters, between which, as we'll walk, we'll be talking about positivity and using your camera as a sketchbook, to paraphrase last week's guest. I'm challenged to share my own work a little more, which you know is going to bring about the awkward Englishman in me. We ask why people get spiky on the street with photographers sometimes. We embrace film once again and relive the horrors of an Insta course that tries to turn one of our listeners into a robot. Fake it till you make it is not for everyone. We're dodging rattlesnakes doing urbex in Utah. Ask if everything really is a story. You'll discover my weak, squeamish point and follow one listener as he trains himself back into making pictures once again more physically. So, lots to talk about. Shall we walk then? Coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on? Check. Long socks, leggings, avoid those horrible things in the undergrowth? Check. Spare batteries, cards or film? Check. Earbuds in? Check. Lens caps off? Check. Let's walk. I've learned some new words this week within the Photowalk edition, and one of those words is understory. It was understory, wasn't it? I'm now doubting myself. Yes, it was understory. The understory of the ground that you're walking upon. I hope I've got that right. I'm going to sound like a proper Herbert now if I haven't. And what Simon, our guest, means by that is the ground that you're walking on or walking through, what the vegetation says about the season, I suppose, about what was there before, about what's around it, about what drops onto it from the trees above. The understory. Yeah. Terry Harrelson is first up today. Terry with an I. Great to hear from you again. Where have you been, Terry? It's been ages. Hello, Neil. Absolutely loved last week's chat with Simon Buckley. You mentioned the takeaways at the end of the show, and there were plenty of those. I'd never thought about fear as being something that can positively drive my own photography, though thinking about it, that's a lot like acting and actors, who often say the nerves and the fear they have prior to a curtain raise is an essential ingredient of what they do. Having a little fear in my work is certainly something I shall take from the show to drive me in my street portrait work that I enjoy so much. Often I find myself going back to the same part of a neighbourhood or familiar situations because I know I can get what I like or what I need or what I want, and I ignore the places that could challenge me or make it harder. Also, that thought Simon had of using his cell phone camera as a sketchbook. And look what he's able to produce from that sketchbook. So many thoughts, and another new photographer introduced to my life. Thank you from Terry. Well, thank you, Terry, for your email. And I agree. I'm just seeing through the can. Well, there's quite a lot of canopies here in the woods, but they don't manage to dwarf this what looks like dead tree that's just in a skeletal way, kind of filing up through the greenery on each side. Makes a really interesting shape, but just now when I saw it, there was sun on it, and it was almost like it became this kind of beacon. But now it's kind of, there's no contrast on it. Now, this is where my guest today would hang around for the next 10 minutes, half an hour and a half, and he'd wait for that sunshine. We could do the magic of radio or podcast, of course, and just wait for the sun, and I'll make out that... Oh, no, it's coming up now. Look, ooh, hang on. The sun has literally just hit it. You'll know this shot when you see it back in the show notes, because you'll see this almost like fingers pointing through the trees around it. Shutter speed 1900 f4, 160 ISO. Oh, illuminated beautifully. Thank you, sun. And meanwhile, on the other side, there's a tree that looks like it's just, well, it could have been hit by lightning, and it's not even a third of a tree. And that's quite interesting. That's kind of sticking up through the undergrowth, but I can't... Yeah, no, there's no sunshine in that part of the woods. Everywhere you start to look, though, you start to see. There's another one here. Now, I haven't got a wide enough angle, and as you'll find out from today's guest, the angle he uses for his woodland photography, or rather the focal length, is very different to what I have. I mean, I'm stuck on effective 35mm focal length. But yeah, a few wonderfully shaped branches they look like they're dead trees. Everything else is covered in leaves, and that won't be the way, will it, in about a month's time here in the northern hemisphere. We're starting to lose, though, you can probably hear it under my foot now, we're starting to lose a lot of the leaves. They're beginning to come down. This morning felt very autumnal. But yes, going back to Terry, thank you. There were many gems from the show, and using your phone as a sketchbook was one of those. And I have a feeling we'll be hearing some very inspirational words today from Simon during the forthcoming weeks. We'll be playing back some of his inspiration as well. Simon number 2, Simon Baxter this week, Simon Buckley last week. Jason Fang, one of our wonderful patrons, sent a message following that episode on the show page as well. Another good episode, Neil, he said. I would love to see your photos in greater detail. I know you pop your photos at the end of the episode page because you want to focus on your guests and contributors, but your photos are very nice too, and it would be great to give them some lightbox treatment. Now I'm being cautious. It doesn't come across as self-indulgent reading something about the pictures that I make. And you're right, I like to feature my pictures, my somethings and nothings, as I call them, at the bottom of the page, partly because they're more record shots of my journey on each walk, but also because I'm cautious about the, hey, look at my pictures thing. And actually because I'm aware mine are usually quiet, and my guest today would wince when I say this, because this is a word that should be removed from the photographic vocabulary for many photographers. But I'm aware that they're often, they feel a bit like snaps. I'm aware sometimes I'm taking more snaps than making photographs with more care. And I've always felt a little bit awkward about that, truth be known, because I see the great work that you send in, and I think, Neil, come on, fella, come on. These need a bit more thought, son. But then Simon Buckley, well, he appeared on the show last week and introduced me and us, in this case, Terry and I, to the expression sketchbook. Let your iPhone, he said, be your sketchbook. Let your iPhone be your sketchbook. Glorious. And I thought, what a great idea. Because your iPhone or your other phones are available. Your Huawei, as my reprobate friend Kevin calls his, they are your constant travel companion, and they come loaded with these great cameras these days, don't they? But I don't think I've ever used an iPhone shot on the show, because, as you know, I use the iPhone as my audio recorder for these walks, which I guess makes that my sort of audio sketchbook. But I do tend to turn to my trusty X100 of V flavour at the moment. I'm thinking about putting an F in the bag as well, if you pardon the expression. And the X Pro 1, which I love. I'm going to be using that more this winter again to make the somethings and nothings, as I call them, my something and nothing shots. But you know what? From today, enthused and inspired somewhat by Simon Buckley, I'm going to think of my offering on the show page as my journey sketchbook. But what's in a word or words, Neil? Well, do you know what? Sometimes everything. So, So Jason, I will lightbox some of them. occasionally. And right, here's a mail from a couple of months ago now, proof that we don't do this in order, but I will get to all the mails. This one is from Christopher Ekman. Hello, I'm Christopher from Sweden, an artist more than a photographer, but I do like to take pictures in the street, and sometimes these images end up as one of my photographic series. Yes, I looked on your website, and I can see the fascinating way that you do that, and you make these series, which is great. At the start of the pandemic, I didn't really go out on the street for some time. It felt odd, like documenting other people's misery, or it felt like people may feel uncomfortable when I took pictures of them wearing a mask. After a while, though, I started taking more and more pictures, the result of a new camera and needing to experiment. You know, sometimes gas can be a good thing, can't it? Sometimes, you know, it gives you the excuse to get out. I must just go and try out my new camera. That's probably not a real reason to go and buy a new camera, though, is it? This past year, I've been confronted by a lot of people questioning my right to take pictures in the street. I don't know if it's related to the pandemic, new laws, or if people got fed up with street photographers in general. Kind regards from Christopher. I'll leave a link to his to Christopher's Insta account so that you can go and see his work. That'll be on the show page today. But I don't know. I'm not sure that people have become fed up with street. Although this time Christopher has caused some photographers to question themselves, I think. I'll agree with that. It's almost like, and I feel this myself actually, we were given permission to stop and really review pictorially and actually mentally our offering. But as for people taking exception, of course there's been the disappointing and you know what, I'll say it, disgusting worldwide phenomena of turning on the picture makers, and that kind of one bad apple approach, you know, where somebody hears one story about a photographer who manipulated something to make a story, and then they think, oh, well, all photographers have to be like that. But in terms of general street work, I've always believed by those that I talk with who are street shooters, successful ones and recognised ones, that it is more about how you act. I mean, if you act cagey, people will be suspicious. But if you march around with that sort of, also that self-congratulatory entitled thing of, I can take pictures where I want, how I want, as often as I want, and you can't stop me. There are plenty of street photographers that have that approach. You can almost read it in their body. Well, you can read it, you can see it in their body language. And that, yes, of course, that turns people off. But equally, I like to think that if you show reverence, if you show respect, then, and this might not be what you've been finding, of course, Christopher, but I from my conversations and what I've found when I've done it, and I'm not any form of great street photographer, I don't do it a lot, but when I have, I've found that reverence and that respect, that's what seems to make the difference. You know, a knowing glance or a smile or even a gesture. I always remember Don McCullin, a film about Don McCullin shooting street. It was in India, wasn't it? And yeah, sure, you might say, well, street tourism, India, they do sit sometimes a bit uncomfortably for some people. But McCullin was out there. He was doing this fantastic job. He just had this reverence for people that he made pictures of and with. And he didn't even need to communicate with spoken language. He managed to do it with a nod or a smile or just a gesture. And people would either respond, well, in fact, I don't think I saw anybody respond negatively. It tended to be quite positive. He'd make the picture and he'd move on. I mean, Don McCullin's not a short chap, is he? He's a towering powerhouse of photography. He can't hide like a ninja. But I think, you know, the running around like a ninja, the sort of hiding in shadows, quickly popping out, making pictures, jumping in front of people. I mean, that excitable nature of street photography, I think that can turn people off and turn people away. And I'm not sure it works. And now, of course, there's going to be exceptions to this. You're shouting now saying, but Neil, what about Bruce Gilden? Obvious example, yes. But I think you know what I mean. I think it's the way you act. Coming back to that thing that we've talked about before, don't spook the animals. and you'll be fine. Look, let's take some inspiration from Gabriele Matola from episode 16, How to Make Street Portraits. We talked about meeting a chap called Charlie, and the fact that she asked for a portrait and he said no, just no. But the two of them actually struck up conversation. So I wondered if that kind of moment advantageously leads you to being able to ask again as a photographer, are you sure? Are you sure I can't make your portrait?
It depends again. I mean, in Charlie's case, I didn't try and talk him into it, but it did come up at the end of the conversation when he told me I had a nice face. And I said, well, so do you. That's why I wanted to make a picture. And he kind of chuckled, as we walked away. But as I walked away, I thought to myself, more often than not, it's not important to make the picture. It's more important to make the connection. People are more important than pictures by far, for sure, 100%. I mean, maybe it sounds convenient to say that, but I do believe it's true for me. But then I'm not on some deadline. I'm not a journalist out on the street trying to make a living at this. And I don't know that would be any less true for people like that, but I think the pressure is greater. But we're just talking street photographs. It depends. Sometimes I'll try and it depends on the type of no I get and the person and the feeling I get from it. If I get a feeling that like this conversation is over, I won't try and push. It depends. Sometimes I'll ask, sometimes I will push, and sometimes I will get a photograph when someone said no.
Gabriele Matola from episode 16. As always, I will provide links to what we talk about, who we talk to within the show notes today. I want to get into the understory, using the lingo now, because occasionally I see the sun really poking through these trees and leaving pools of light. Right now, because it's the clouds are moving quite quickly today. It's quite windy out, but you wouldn't know it, actually. You can't really hear it. I'm sort of sheltered by this magnificent, very mature woodland that I'm in. But I might just wait a while. I'm going to put myself in the right position, find my way through this understory. I'm being very careful not to. I don't want to. You can hear them sort of crackling through, and I don't want to break anything, but there's branches poking out. I'm not going to snap any of them for sure, but there's pools of light that keep appearing, and I want to try and capture that for you. I might break away very quickly in this conversation to make a picture. Now, this is, just before I get to your next letter, this is, I suppose, our last mention really for something we've been supporting now for 3 months, Photo Swindon, which you can see more about and learn more about if you just use the @Photo Swindon, @Photo Swindon, SWINDON, all one word, on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram. In essence, it's been this wonderful outdoor exhibition in the parks of Swindon. And so far, they had 3 photographers. First up, it was Jason Florio, who made way for Martin Parr, who made way to the incredible Sanna de Wilde. And that show leads us up to the 3rd of October. So wherever you are in the world, if you want to see more about this exhibition, and we talked a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, myself and Edmund Terracopium, about the nature of outdoor exhibitions and how useful that's been during this time of pandemic, of course, that you could still hold them. They didn't have to be closed down or shut down. So yes, @Photo Swindon on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram for news and some pictures and scenes and wherever you are in the world, you can be a part of that great outdoor exhibition. Right, some lights poking through at last, and the moss on the tree that's fallen down that's been here for a long while has just become illuminated, and everything around it is thrust into darkness. Now, I like to underexpose a lot, particularly when I'm trying to gather pictures where the light difference is so extreme. So I do have to use my neutral density filter because the minimum ISO is 160 on here. 160, f4, shutter speed 100th. There we go. Underexposed by 3 stops using the electronic neutral density filter. So, where should we go next in the world? Just a local hop, skip and jump to Alex Militsky in Siberia. Try and get myself out of this part of I'm back onto a path here. There we go. Hello, Neil. I'd like to touch on several topics in this letter. Not handwritten, sorry, maybe next time. Yes, you know my passion for handwritten letters. Film photography. Film photography. As I wrote in a previous letter last October, these years go round quickly, don't they? We're almost in another one. I kind of restarted my photography hobby and grew it into a passion by shooting film or on film. Well, prices have stopped that this year. Right now I'm shooting almost exclusively digital because film prices here have gone through the roof, and recently I've been feeling quite uninspired. So I decided to take my film camera to a portrait shoot I did with my friend. I didn't think much when I was clicking the shutter, AF body on aperture priority, and honestly didn't expect the pictures to be any good. But then I developed and scanned the film, and the pictures, well, they kind of clicked with me. And I don't think that would have happened if they were shot on the same lens on a digital body with a full-frame sensor. I honestly don't know where I'm going to go with this, but I wanted to share some pictures from that shoot, and I guess I'm going to drop quite a hefty sum of my hard-earned money on film and chemicals again, since I'm almost completely out. Well, going by the pictures that you made, I guess you probably are, because they do look great. They do have a different feeling, don't they? I know, you know, people say, yeah, but you can just add a filter. But it's the experience, it's the whole sort of feeling of making film pictures, isn't it? That's what it's about. I wonder if I can get through there. I'm aware that there's some fencing here, and I probably shouldn't go that way. Okay. So I do think there is an entirely different feeling to it. So I'm with you, Alex. I'll pop the pictures that you sent onto the show page today, some from your walk and those portrait pictures too that you've just referenced. And I do know what you mean about the beauty of refinding an affinity for shooting with film. I'm absolutely loving shooting with it right now myself personally. I've collated there's about 20 rolls of film now, some from walks, some from time spent with my youngest photographing the trains that you know that he loves. But all of them, they make me feel very different about working with a camera. They really do. And I have a very, very big deving session ahead of me, which I intend to do with a coffee or 8 perhaps, and my good pal Giles in his dark room very soon. But Alex had another point to make about social media. I find myself in a very similar position, he says, to Cara Mew, your guest from episode 229. She was talking about social media and Instagram. I like the basic premise of social media, to make a platform for people to communicate, but I hate that treadmill, as Cara called it. I took a course about how to make your photography a source of income. It was mostly a guide to social media marketing tailored to photographers. And there was a part about copywriting and making posts according to a content plan. Make a post every other day about something your audience is interested in and collect statistics. Oh no, really? It all sounds a bit, I don't know, mechanical, doesn't it? I hated it, he says. I'm not surprised, Alex. The moment you included the words collect statistics, my heart properly sank. I constantly, says Alex, felt like I was lying to everyone, that I was a fraud since, and frankly I didn't care about the topics I was forcing myself to write about. But the worst thing was the mandatory questions at the end to get people to comment on that post. Yes, I've been on a course or a workshop, or sat in a workshop very similar to that, where it was enthused that I should ask questions at the end, which, yes, I mean, but Neil, you do that for this. Yes, I do, but then that's the medium of this show is Q&A, isn't it? But on an Instagram post, if you're doing it just because you're kind of engineering some kind of response, then I don't know, it feels a different place to do that. But as Alex says, those were the most empty, meaningless questions I've ever asked or written, with the most fake, disgusting, happy-go-lucky attitude. I guess the fake it till you make it way is not for me. Right now, I only post when I feel like posting and when I have something to say. Sure, that doesn't get any clients and leaving that 9-to-5 job I hate, but I feel a bit better about myself by only writing about things valuable or interesting to me. Hallelujah. Anyway, Alex, the honesty thing is really important. I think the fake it till you make it phenomenon, I really do believe that is reaching a sell-by date. I actually feel that that sincerity and authenticity is becoming something sought after and so much more respected. So, my advice is, who am I to give advice, but I will, is post because you're proud, post because you think you have something to share that can genuinely help somebody on levels other than purchasing decisions. But that does come with a caveat. I'm wary of criticizing or offending, those who are considered influencers. My cousin is actually an influencer. She will say, I'm not an influencer, but she is. She influences people to make purchasing decisions. That's influential because really, Instagram is, after all, love it or loathe this, it is also a marketing channel. It's an advertising channel. It's a PR channel too. The purists may not like it. You don't have to use it like that, but that's the way it is. It's free generally, and as our parents taught us, well, mine anyway, this was a favourite phrase of my father, there's no such thing as a free lunch, son. And he's right. And yeah, will Instagram share in quite the same fashion that it did for you once upon a time? Maybe not, but are you using it for that? Well, if you are, you need to engage it in a way that's more commercial. If you're not, engage it in a way that you enjoy engaging with. And surely it's does that make sense? Surely it's better, though, to have 20 people that say, love it, or comment, or sparks debate, or that sort of, that positive interaction that you have, rather than looking for 100 or 1,000 likes or 2,000 likes. And it's interesting, isn't it, that a lot of people now have checked that button, haven't they, that, where they don't have to show their likes anymore. I think that's a positive thing. I really do. Now, I know you're expecting me to play a clip from Cara Mew now. I thought you would, Neil, but no, on this occasion I'm not going to. I'm going to play a little bit of advertising and lifestyle photographer Finn Beale's conversation again with me from episode 253, which I think is very pertinent actually, because it's about this pressure we pile on ourselves as photographers, trying to create content. And wasn't that a content plan? Wasn't that about us just clinical? Did I say mechanic? Clinical is probably a better expression. Oh, really? It's sometimes, as Finn suggests, you need to quite literally refocus.
Sometimes it's tricky in this world where we are bombarded by images via platforms like Instagram, and people are traveling all over the world and flying in jets or, climbing volcanoes, just to get really demoralized and go, okay, well, I haven't had that opportunity, so I can't make work like it. But you can make work wherever you are. It's just your approach. And sometimes if you are feeling like that, just close that bloody app down and just reconnect with your surroundings, and you'll be amazed at what sort of comes to mind. It's just, there's a sort of like a value in doing nothing and stepping back a little bit. And sort of kind of buzzword at the moment, isn't it? Staying in the moment, but reconnecting with your own space rather than sort of like connecting with far off places through your phone.
Finn Beales, who taught us about the dirty foreground, didn't he? That layering technique. His word for the layering technique, really, which is apparent, really, in a picture I'm about to talk about. So if you haven't sent in any letters or your pictures to the Photowalk, I'd love to hear from you. This is, it is your show in all respects. It's driven by that you see, the pictures that you make, that you send in, that you talk about, the stories that you have about the projects that you're working on, response, feedback, that's a nicer word, to the episodes that you hear as well. And also, of course, now we have the new Community 365 feature, which I'm really appreciating the work that you've put into this. It's absolutely phenomenal, the stuff that you've been producing. It's wonderful. And I don't like to draw one out, but I'm going to mention one that it's today's, isn't it, for Alan Beach, who's a patron supporter of the show. It's Glastonbury Tour at sunrise. It's a big colour image, glorious colour image, from a photographer who I follow on Insta for all the right reasons. It's a wonderful scene, shooting through the layers of path, and well, that's what I mean by the dirty foreground, the path and the river and the fields and the wild grasses that dance in front of the lens, all the way up to the scene. I will link to him in today's show notes, but his Insta is Alan Beach, ALANBEECH, BWCH, and his landscape work is just stunning, as you'll see. There's not a lot actually on the. It's quite interesting. I often on Instagram feeds, when you send me yours, and I follow a link to you and I go via your website and find your Instagram, I'm always fascinated to go further back and see from where you've come, and and I don't mean that just in terms of experience, because there's a great many of you that have far more experience than 16 years in photographing. I mean, 16 years professionally for me, and I did bits before it, but not as much as some of you, or many of you, that have got wonderful stories, decades of photographing. But it's interesting to follow your journey back and follow the path of your Instagram feed. And in Alan's case, it doesn't go a long way back, but you see this sort of sudden step change of interests and scene. Oh, well, you'll understand yourself if you go there. And I think it's fantastic to and that's one thing. And we were just now talking about Instagram. That's just one of the things I do like about Instagram, to be able to track back through a journey, the understory of Instagram. Do you think there's such a thing? Right, we've been to Siberia, England, and Sweden so far. So here's a mail from central Utah. If we were flying to these places for each show, I'd make a lot of great walks, but Greta would probably take me off her Christmas card list, wouldn't she? Hello, he says, and good day, which I thought would, in cliche terms, mean that you were writing from Australia land. But no, they say good day in Utah as well. My name is Robert Stevens, long-time listener, first-time emailer, and hearing your recent episodes in reference to urbex inspired me to send my own versions in, which is really more rural urbex, as I live in a very rural area in Utah over here in the States. And if you're thinking, and you weren't with us on those weeks where we've been talking about urbex, stands for urban exploration. So taking your camera into old houses and tumbled down buildings. And I've, as you know, attempted doing it myself a bit, but I always feel a bit unnerved on my own. Does anybody want to come on my urbex experiences? I'd be far more brave with you by my side, I really would. But as Robert says, I tracked down derelict and historic buildings not long for this world, many of which have roots from the pioneer era, and I wanted to share some with you. This particular location, which I'll share on the show page today, is one I discovered and fell in love with, returning again and again to photograph in different various conditions. Walking around this pioneer era abandoned farmstead has the hint of the past lives that once filled its halls and rooms with vibrance. Perhaps the most haunting photo is the bird hanging from the horsehair it was weaving into its nest. It literally worked itself to death. I know. That sounds hideous, I know. And you're thinking, Neil, far too much information. But I saw that picture, and I had to do not just a double take, a triple take, or a quadruple take, or whatever comes after that. I looked at that image again and again and again. I thought, has he put the bird into that image? Is that a comp to make us feel broadly uncomfortable? But no, it's the real thing. The local news, he said, also did a feature on me for my work with local abandoned structures. If you're interested, I've got a website link that Robert sent to me, and I'll put that on the show page as well. It's a news report, it's a news interview that he did with Fox, and it's really good actually. So I'll share your piece and your website on the show page today, and I did watch that feature through. Your take on not sharing where you go, by the way, which you do talk about within that film. Well, Simon Baxter, my guest today, feels the same way about woodland. But all will become apparent within, the reasons why he doesn't always share where he goes as well during the interview today. But I did spot, Robert, by the way, in that TV interview you did, that you were wearing flip-flops or thongs, as they call them in Australia. Do you call them thongs in New Zealand as well, or is that just an Australian thing? And I was thinking, though, you're in Utah, and these houses usually involve lots of long grass getting out to them. And I had to look it up, but the Great Basin rattlesnake is pretty active where you live. So, Robert, I want you to promise me you're going to buy some boots for your future photo walks and urbex. And I need photographic evidence. I did check in with Wild Aware Utah, and they said you have to wear closed-toed shoes definitely when you're walking around these parts. So that bothered me. Anyway, thank you, Robert. Pictures are on the website today. Love them, but please, buy some boots. So let me introduce you to this week's guest. Chapter 1, 2 chapters today, second one coming up, tail end of the show. Simon Baxter. Well, he's going to fill you in with the story so far in terms of his life, and he'll fill you in well in a moment. But I do want to say this. I have talked with easily over 100 photographers since starting this podcast, and probably nearer to the 250, 300 mark if you consider my other podcast with me reprobate buddy Mullins. And every person shares their love and complete enthusiasm for what they do. But Simon is quite different. And whilst you're waiting for me to tell you why, I have to say I can't quite put my finger on it. But I get a very strong feeling from our guest today that fills me with the idea that he's found a complete happy place, photographically that is, out of a situation that at one stage seemed destined to be anything but. And unknowingly, actually, I've been treading the grounds of woodland without fully appreciating the affinity for being on my own. I mean, you often hear me say I love being on my own during these photo walks, and I often find you do, don't you? Find me in a woodland or a forest, and it does seem to be a happy place for me, surrounded by living things, some of which have been there hundreds of years and would certainly have a story to tell if only we'd given voices to trees instead of influencers. And I wasn't expecting it, but Simon has opened my mind to that from a conversation I had with him only a week or so ago. But I couldn't wait to share this one with you. If I could choose to spend time just walking with, I honestly mean this, and if Simon, you're listening to this bit, I know you're somebody that would probably close his ears at this particular moment, but if I could choose to spend time just walking with 10 photographers, I think I could safely say Simon Baxter has just made it into that list of 10. Simon, I first came into touch with your work about 3 years back, watching a Sean Tucker film, where you both spent time making this film about being an introvert. You two seem to share characteristics of that, I'm going to call it an emotion, but it was an accident that actually led to your photography work, wasn't it? The path that you took, quite literally. What actually happened to you? Because it wasn't the first time you'd photographed, I know, but it was what brought you back to it.
Yes, so I started photography, an interest in photography from when I was only about 8 years old, something like that. But it's something that's just drifted in and out, has just been a casual hobby. But then mountain biking became my number one passion. That's what I invested my time in. That was my escape, if you like. And then it was in 2012, March 2012, I was out riding my bike. I hit a rock and my saddle bounced up, smacked me in the bum, and I had this sudden pain in my lower back. Oh. And then it just faded away. And I didn't think anything more of it. But then about 15 minutes later, I'm trying to pedal my bike, and I thought, I feel really weak. There's just this terrible weakness through my legs and into my knees. And I got home that evening and started with pain in my knees, and it was there constantly for 6 months and stopped me from riding the bike. And then I had the wrong physio treatment, which meant that it got worse because the core problem, the source of the issue, wasn't my knees, it was in my hips and in my back. And I ended up rupturing a disc in my lower back, which caused a lot of nerve irritation and some irreversible damage. So I ended up with nerve pain, burning pain in my feet, muscular issues. mobility issues. It just kind of sent me into this spiral of, I wouldn't say depression, I was still sort of functional, but I was very sort of deeply unhappy because the thing that was my release, the mountain biking, I couldn't do that anymore. What compounded that was that my work was sedentary. I was a website developer. I sat at the desk every day. I couldn't do that any longer either. And my partner, Adele, she recognized that I was deeply unhappy. I was working from home. People think working from home is the golden ticket, but when you're in a situation like that, full of unhappiness and anxiety, being at home alone is not a good environment to be in. So she suggested that we get a dog, which was a big surprise because my partner Adele, she's allergic to dogs. But a friend was doing a one-off litter of these labradoodles, which are apparently hypoallergenic.
Hypoallergenic, yes, they are.
Yes, yeah. So thankfully, Adele is absolutely fine with Meg. So Meg came into our lives in April 2014, and everything changed from there. She was like the catalyst for change. Well, I guess everything started with my back injury, but she was the start of positive changes. Because I was starting to improve a little bit in terms of managing my pain, in terms of my mobility. So she came in at just the right time where she needed to be eased into the world. She couldn't go on long walks. So we just go on short walks together, which started as 15 minutes, then half an hour, then a little bit longer. We'd walk a mile. Then as she became stronger and I progressed, we'd then walk 3 miles. So then I started to take the camera, I'd photograph her in the local forest. And then I hadn't used my car for months because I hated sitting down in the car and using the pedals. But then I started to drive 5 minutes away, then 15 minutes away, and we'd go for a walk, explore different locations, and I'd photograph Meg within the landscape. And then I started to turn my camera back towards the landscape. So just enjoying the company of Meg and being outdoors. But then I kind of rekindled an interest in photographing the beautiful countryside around us.
You're a nemophilist, which is a phrase that I'd not heard of before, Simon. Now I feel educated now. What is a nemophilist?
I think it's defined as a haunter of the woods.
A haunter or a hunter?
Yeah. It's just someone who I think has an affinity for woodland and just enjoys spending as much time there as possible, and obviously gets some sort of very fulfilling reward from spending time there. You
mentioned that you'd explore woodland, I suppose, through your biking, but I would imagine your knowledge is now very deep indeed. You know what everything is. You seem to know the patterns. You even see your own impact in the woods as well, which is fascinating. You've become really at one with it, haven't you?
I think that's where the deep sense of satisfaction comes from. Having spent time in woodland, discovering that through a process of trying to manage chronic pain, and that realization that spending time in woodland offered a type of genuine distraction that nowhere else offered. So photographing the wider landscape was great, but it wasn't distracting. Whereas woodland is incredibly complex. There's lots of different forms of stimulus in terms of sight, smell, sound, but that's constantly shifting. So with every single step forward or step to the side, visually, aesthetically, everything's shifting all the time. It's chaotic. There's a lot to consume. So to try and make sense of that with the camera is quite a task, really. So it needs your undivided attention. So your thought processes start to shift away from the stresses of everyday life, away from pain. When something has such a profound effect and a positive impact upon your life, you become very emotionally invested into it. So it develops into an empathy for the places that, you photograph. And that empathy then inspires you to learn because you care about the trees, you care about the woodland because of the impact they've had on you. They're in tandem. You're learning how to make sense of it photographically, but what helps to inform those decisions is learning about the trees, learning about that space, what it means. Why does that tree, why is it formed in that way? What ecological significance does it have? Why is that stuff growing in the understory? What does that mean? And it's just incredibly rewarding and inspires you to go deeper and deeper and deeper. But it's like this innate need to kind of be at one with nature, have an emotional affinity towards it. and for it to become part of your identity.
I'm also very aware in the photo walks I do, and I'm not going to compare myself for one moment with yourself, with the photography and what you experience. But I have noticed the woodland devours stuff, and I'm constantly coming across stuff that I think, what is that doing in the middle of this woods?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the wonder of woodland, which I enjoy the most. It's the experience. And that's what I try to portray in the photographs that I take, is the awe, the quiet awe, the kind of majesty of it, the peace, the calm, the tranquility, the sense of a sanctuary. But not only that mood changes depending upon the conditions and the time of year. So it can go from somewhere feeling very peaceful to somewhere that is spooky, is scary, is unnerving, and that happens depending upon, like I said, the time of year. You can go when the canopy's gone, the leaves have dropped, and you're left with the skeletal forms of oak trees with the mossy branches. I've taken an image of a dead oak tree before with its beautiful sort of squirming branches set against the linear patterns of pine trees. And they can be incredible, unnerving experiences, but that's all part and parcel of it. And I think that it's not just a case of, making an image which is aesthetically pleasing. It's about communicating how you connected with that place at that moment in time. And like you said, you find things where, just hints of the past. And that's what's so fascinating about trees, is that they're observers of time. Some of these have been living for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Of course.
So they've seen when, that wall first appeared, and that now crumbled barn when that was still there, and perhaps somebody was living there.
I mean, when you talk about the spookiness of the woods, there is no other word. I mean, I can hear your pictures, which is interesting. You spend a lot of time in the mist. It seems to be a favourite time for you, the mist and the woods, and I can understand that. And I don't know whether you're aware of this, but when I look at your pictures, I feel I can hear them, because there is a very distinctive sound. Are you aware of that as you're photographing?
I am, and it's something that I've become more aware of, and has again been inspired by developing knowledge of that environment. Yeah. Going back to that sort of spooky dead oak tree, the silence there was incredible, because the fog was so heavy and dense, and literally the only thing that I could hear was the occasional flap of wings in the treetops. And it's like something out of a horror movie. There's no songbirds, there's nothing cheerful. Yeah. It's just a flap of wings. You don't know what it is. You can't see it, but that's all that you hear. But there's something about the fog as well, which just carries that sound and kind of adds to the atmosphere. But equally, what I appreciate just as much now is the springtime and going out, when the birds are full of song, they're active, and they just, it's like, well, as the term goes, it's full of the joys of spring. Yes. And that adds to experience as well. And I think before, because I was going into these places unhappy, in pain, feeling desperate, that was reflected in the images that I made. They were more melancholic, they were more somber, they were embracing the kind of foggy conditions where the view was obscured, individual trees that were gnarled, writhing, falling to pieces. Whereas now I'm embracing the positivity of woodland. Rather than seeing a fallen branch as a representation of myself, I now see it as something that's nourishing and part of the life cycle of woodland.
And you're very much a scouter. In fact, in one of your latest films, it might even be the latest, where you said, "Oh no, not another Simon scouting film." but you catalogue, as has been suggested by our mutual friend Sean. You do spend time scouting, and you will return on the right day, and that right day might not be for 6 months. Do you like spontaneity, or does it always have to be planned in this sense?
No, I love spontaneity, and I think even the scouting missions, they can be very spontaneous. And I made a video recently about the thrill of the unexpected. Yes. Where you go, it's like I said in the video, it's like a mindset. So even though secretly I might be wanting to create a nice image that day, I'm going to treat it as a scouting mission to keep my expectations down. because expectation in photography is just the killer of creativity. Whereas if you go out with the mindset of, I'm just here to enjoy, I just want to be present in this moment, enjoy, exploring this new area of woodland, If I find something, great. If I don't, I don't. I've enjoyed a good wander with Meg. And that kind of mindset, I think, just allows you to see more, because you're not consumed with some preconceived idea. You're not consumed with a pressure to produce. You just want to wander and absorb what that place has to offer and be open to the character of the place and try to connect with what that woodland is about and let that inform and inspire the types of images that you want to make there. And the time between then and actually making the image work has been as much as 2.5 years in the past.
I mean, your famous Valley stories 1, 2, and 3 are great examples of that, aren't they? And you're sitting. The audience don't get the benefit of seeing this, but you're sitting beneath one of those. I mean, you're constantly returning to try and perfect your picture. And I think finally maybe you felt you did that with 3, unless you're thinking, no, I'm going back for 4, 5, and 6 yet.
Yeah, to me, it feels like an obligation, if that makes sense, because these places I see them as a gift. They've offered me so much, not just in terms of photographic development, growth as a creative, but they're part and parcel. My whole development and rehabilitation and, feeling happier is wrapped up in these places. So I feel obligated to show the very best of them. The sad thing is that scene no longer exists.
Oh, no.
So I was just fortunate to have made an image work 18 months after I first found it.
Somebody's moved or chopped that tree up, have they, at last?
Yeah, they've done. The forest has had a bit of a thinning process.
Right.
They've taken some heavy machinery straight through that valley.
What a shame. What a shame.
But it's equally, a valuable learning process, because the places which you can sometimes take for granted and just assume that they're going to be there, in another 2 years' time, and you don't feel the pressure of having to keep going back to make that image work in the short term. It actually proves that, that everything is quite fragile. How
do you research? I mean, you do your scouting, but research. I often walk into woods. I'm at the other side before I've even begun, thinking, oh, this looks so promising, and it didn't deliver. Are you an ordnance survey man? Do you do your research that way?
So I think people have had the wrong impression when watching videos that I'm in these grand forests.
Yeah.
Because people always leave messages like, how do you not get lost in these places? Because you're not walking footpaths, you're just kind of going through the understory. I'm like, well, it takes me 2 minutes to walk from one side to the other.
Well, that was going to be my question as well, because it does look exactly like that.
I use Bing Maps.
What maps?
Bing Maps.
Bing Maps, right.
Yeah, so Microsoft Bing. So their mapping software. And when you use that on a desktop, very much like Google Maps, you've got the satellite images, but then you've also got Ordnance Survey. So you can kind of compare the two. And that's free to access.
Which Google doesn't have, of course, does it? Bing does.
But yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I scan around on the satellite images because you can spot a plantation a mile off and you can spot a deciduous woodland. So I'm just looking for pockets. This is where the local knowledge really comes into play, because the national park here over 1,000 years ago would have been covered in oak trees and other native species. And then we get to, more than 1,000 years ago, then we get to the Bronze Age and they started to clear it all. But then just left in these little valleys that are difficult to get to, which haven't been sort of harvested. There's these remnants of just these little oak woods, just tucked away in quiet valleys, not easy to get to. So I'm just looking for those.
But how do you get to them, though? How do you? Because I've seen them, and I think, well, if I want to get to that, I've got to go through that field of bulls. Or well, you've obviously had this challenge.
Yeah, I've been chased by cows more than once.
Yeah.
And that usually ends up with being electrocuted by a fence at the same time.
Oh God.
Yeah. So that's the advantage of spotting it on satellite images, then going to Ordnance Survey and finding out if it's private or if it's open access.
Yeah.
And then to see if there's a public footpath which can take you there. But what you were saying about the woodlands being very small, going into the smallest woodlands, like I say, you can literally walk the length of it in 2 minutes. But once you're in the middle of that, you can feel as if you're in the middle of nowhere, as if you're like in untouched wild nature, because I still don't have the capability to walk long distances. It gets too painful.
Right.
So that's the other draw of woodland, is that you can, have a relatively short walk, and then once you're there, you don't have to cover a lot of ground. And those tiny little pockets offer so many photographs, and that's what fascinates me.
Simon Baxter, and he'll return shortly. You'll find examples of his work on the website today, of course. Equally, links outside to his work, and chapter 2 follows shortly. Just before we get to the next letter, thank you to those new patrons that joined us. So I saw some new names there this week who wanted to support the show. It's very, very much appreciated. Thank you. I want to bring you photographers that you're not expecting, some that you know of, some that are very well known, and some that are going to become new friends to you within the show. So when you do invest your support by buying, well, essentially the price of one high street coffee per month, that really helps the show stay here and maintains a future for this podcast. And to thank you, if you are a patron, I do an extra little show each week, a kind of a diary show. Things that happen to a working photographer, things that I've seen, things that I feel, things that you've suggested to, and equally sometimes you get to hear extra bits of the interview or interviews or thoughts when the tape kept rolling after an interview, perhaps, that otherwise we don't play on the show here. So thank you very much. Tomorrow on the More Show, which is over on the Patreon app. It's a very easy app to download, by the way, and once you're in it, you've got an extra little player, and there's 50? Are we up to 54 more shows now? I think there's 54, and then there's shows before that as well. So there's quite a lot of material in there to catch up with, and also now for everybody, the scripts that I have for the diary pieces, because they take a while to write, they're in there as well. So forming some sort of ebook as you go along. Tomorrow, I'm going to reveal a test I took to determine what kind of photography I should shoot, or what kind of photographer I should be. I'll be inviting you to take that test as well. Let's see how you fare with it. Here's one from Steve Meadham in Cardiff. At last, a letter from Cardiff, from Wales. I was beginning to think I'd offended you. By the way, it's now the law to tell me where you're emailing from. I've been thinking about putting some kind of digital pin into a digital map over the last month or so. So if you can remember to tell me where you're emailing from. Occasionally it's obvious, because you send me, of course, pictures from where you are, or I can link to your website and see exactly where you are, but not always. Sometimes I do wonder where you're emailing from, so do let me know. Hi Neil, I've finally managed to listen to every episode since day one of the show, and it's felt like quite the journey. You could almost say story. See, this word story keeps popping up. The change of mood and style and format feels like I've been in the company of somebody finding their creative feet. And that's fascinating in itself. Are you aware of just how much you have laid bare during this time? Cool, that sounds either dramatic or scary. Have I? Well, I like to feel... I always felt with radio, when I presented radio, that it was that was what it was about, really. Sharing yourself. I think when I started out, it was all a bit DJ-ish and a bit contrived. No, very contrived. And as I've matured, I like to think my communication's matured with it. And part of that is sharing exactly how I feel about what I do, this thing that we do, photography. Then that's a good thing, isn't it, really? But going back to story, do you think, says Steve, that word story has become an overused trope? Everything is about the story these days, when clearly not everything has a story. For example, can a food shoot have a story? Can a single commercial portrait, a straight head and shoulder shot, have a story? Can a product laid on a table have a story? Does everything really need a story? Or has it just become another buzzword that's been watered down with its overuse? Yeah, now we had a very similar question to this in the Fuji cast. I'm trying to remember what we said then, but I know what you mean, and it is something that I think personally myself. It's certainly something I've wondered about. I mean, here I am in the woods, and each of these trees you could argue, has a story. But they can't talk. Or perhaps they do. I mean, the bark peel tells me that they're not doing so well here and there, maybe, or have been got at by deer. And now we're in the land of tracking and stalking, you see. So there we go, their story. Being able to read the understory, as Simon calls it, the floor of the woodland. But yeah, I do know what you mean about story. I was listening to somebody talk last week during a job I was filming for a clothing brand. And they mentioned the idea that these clothes have a story. And at first, if I was honest with you, I kind of wondered what they meant, until they talked about the patterns and how they're made and what tools they're made with, how many hours go into it. And I thought about who would be wearing it, I suppose. And I reckon that's a kind of indirect, unseen story, because to me, initially, and perhaps still, it's just a nice jacket with swirly patterns on it. Is it a story in itself? But definitely, yes. I mean, people are talking more about stories, the story. And I get it, editorial often has a story. News, of course, has a story. Weddings, they have a story. Sports, there's a story. But a burger on a plate in Instagram, and I'm being wary not to go Insta-bashing again, but I'm not so sure it does. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts. Here's the email address to the show. It's studio@photographydaily.show, studio@photographydaily.show. Has story become a trope? Has it? Is it a phrase that's somewhat overused? Here's a mail from somebody, if we were talking in old-fashioned money language, has become, I like to think, a bit of a pen pal. In fact, those who I talk to regularly through mail and text and message, and you know who you are, you're all pen pals, aren't you? And I think that's quite magical. And then this pen pal is 11,700 miles away. So Matt Searles, are you listening? Keep that truck on the road, sir. Concentrate. Hi Neil, it's my first time writing into Photography Daily, so I thought I'd share my Friday photo walk experience with you. Being in New Zealand, I've been saving photo walk editions of the podcast from the previous week to accompany my rural mail run up the beautiful, now I've got to get this right, Rangitata Valley. I know you struggle a bit with some of our Maori place names, I do. Here in the South Canterbury region of the South Island, that's where I am. It's great to hear you experience the great outdoors whilst I am doing the same. I am experiencing the great outdoors, but look where well, it's all magical, as I said at the start of the show, but I don't quite see the mountains that you see. As I'm behind the wheel 5 days a week, I always take my camera with me, but recently I've been inspired to think of my Friday run more as a photo walk, to echo the theme for the day. The shots I've included below, yes, I'm going to put these on the photo walk page today. They are therefore taken from my driver's seat. That's not a photo walk, that's a photo drive. But what a drive. As I make my way on my 100-kilometre round trip, I primarily shoot with the Fujifilm GFX 50R with the incredibly versatile 45-100 lens being the main optic. Feel free to check out my Instagram feed. I will. He does. He's got an Instagram. He's got his own Instagram. Then he's got one called Mail to Messi, being part of Mesopotamia. And Mail to Messi. I'll link to it so that you can see this fantastic feed. The sights that he sees as he makes a mail run. Whoa. Hope you enjoy the photos attached, says Matt, and I'd love for you to share them with the rest of the community. Photography Daily's been a godsend, and with my love of capturing images, my delivery run is never boring. Keep up the good work. You've created a great community. Best regards, Matt. Well, thank you, Matt. That's very kind of you to say. I'd like to concur. I concur. I do think it's a good community. I'm very proud of the friends that we've made in here. And, of course, if you're part of the Patreon, well, it goes back to saying thank you to a community that we've developed in there, and of course the community that we've developed on our Facebook group. There is a Facebook page. That's not the same as the group. In the group, I like to think of it as a safe place to go if you have any questions, and we often have quite interesting debate, and sometimes you do hear those debates brought on to we haven't done it this week, but we do reasonably often bring those debates into the Friday Photo Walk as well. So thank you, Matt. Now, more astute listeners of both casts I present will probably be wondering why they're feeling a sense of déjà vu. Well, that is because I chatted to Matt for an edition of the FujiCast not so long back, and I'd like to, if you don't mind, play you just a few moments from that interview. Now, Matt runs a cafe in the valley from which he does this incredible mail run. And that cafe, when he took it on, came with the mail run. Yes, they're part and parcel to the same business. Have a cafe, do the mail run. Okay, don't mind if I do. Thank you very much. And he makes this every day in Mesopotamia. He has, I think, as I've said, probably one of the most beautiful, picturesque photo walks of anybody that I've heard from. You can see his pictures online today on the show page, and I know you'll be nodding yes to that. But in the meantime, here's some words from Matt, and I love the way he describes his role as a photographer.
I kind of describe myself sometimes as a rural street photographer, and sometimes I'm a landscape photographer, and other times I'm very much that kind of rural documenter. The person I kind of looked to for a lot of my inspiration was James Revilius, basically, and his body of work is a great inspiration of what you can do in a very small area and trying to document the daily life of people within that area and also the landscape that's there. And that's one thing that James did particularly well. He had that wee corner of North Devon that really, in about the same size as my mail run, he was probably even less than that actually, that he was working, and that was the sole inspiration for his content of, well, you know, all of the photographs that he created. And so for me, that kind of attitude is, it's really important. It's a big inspiration as well.
Matt Searles, Chapter 2 in a moment, talking to Simon Baxter. Here's one from Matthias Fox, somewhere in Germany. We've been truly international today, haven't we? You did once tell me, actually, Matthias, because we featured your fantastic pictures before, mails from you. But he's been making a photo walk, not in woodland, but within touching distance and amongst plants almost as high, it seems, which I appreciate will now have been farmed. But they are cornfields, which I always find just a tad on the spooky side. Cornfields, they are generally the places where many horror films start and end for the unfortunate protagonists, don't they? So you might remember, do you remember, it would have been last summer actually, or at the start of this summer. No, I'm pretty sure it was last year. But I went into a cornfield and I had to step out reasonably quickly because my active imagination went into turbo power. So, yeah, I'm not sure I could do those nighttime walks that Simon Buckley was talking about last week. Although I did notice, by the way, that Simon Buckley has various fantastic courses that you can go on and you can investigate parts of Salford and Manchester. What's this up here? This is incredible sort of, almost like framework. Is it some sort of farming framework? What is this? I don't know. Is this a cornfield? No. That would be truly contrived, wouldn't it? Neil, you've contrived a cornfield. Is it? No, it's not a cornfield. It looked like it was, I don't know what it is though. It's almost like some sort of lifting gear. Where are we? Shutter speed 280 f4, 160 ISO. Lovely puffy clouds today. Look at those. Oh, they're magnificent. Right, Matthias Fox, yes, somewhere in Germany. Where were we? Oh, yes, in a cornfield. Hi, Neil, I'm in a cornfield for my walk, but there's a backstory coming up. These shots were taken on trusty Voigtlander lenses. I know you like your Voigtlanders. I remember that from the last time. And the pictures, they'll be on the show page today. And the dark, foreboding nature of them is absolutely delicious. Particularly the one at the end where the trees are poking out from... They look like they're poking out from the cornfield, but I know they're not. They're just beyond, aren't they? But they look very, I don't know, the sort of twisted nature of them. It's all very, very dramatic and a bit scary. Honestly, go look at them. You'll see exactly what I mean. But equally, and using the word story again, they could be telling a story about Matt, actually, these pictures. Because, well, let me read on. Historically, says Matthias, I had an accident ripping off all the ligaments in my left knee. Oh, that doesn't sound pleasant at all. and I had to exercise hard to be able to walk longer distances again. To stay motivated, I used to use a cornfield to get some black and white images. Over time, I was able to walk further and further between the fields. I was inspired by the landscape images of Don McCullin. Oh, we mentioned McCullin again, which I will never reach, he says. But why not aim high? Why not indeed? You're absolutely right. And you've chosen, well, Don McCullin's images. They, well, he describes his, what does he call them? He calls these images, that he makes these superb images in Somerset. They're always very dark and, as I say, foreboding and very mysterious. And these sort of seriously overcast skies that hang across his Somerset pictures. But he describes them as his darkness, doesn't he? He says that's the darkness coming out from within, not being able to cast off his life's story, that he's seen as a war, conflict, and going to famine zones photographer. I mean, you know what I mean about Don McCullin's work. Anyway, the subject, corn plants, says Matt. They're not that exciting, I know. I was lucky to have some heavy skies to work with, though. Maybe you like these mundane images of a pretty boring subject. Now, I wasn't going to read that out. I thought, no, I won't read that out. But I have, and I'm going to say, Matthias, I am issuing you with a yellow card with a cheeky smile. Are you kidding? I love them. And I'm sure those that see them on the show page today will say the same. But, you know, they have the context of your... Now I know this... Of course, I know that we're going to use this word a lot now, aren't we? What was the word? We've sort of had a word of the week for the last couple of weeks running. I think this week's is most certainly story. But there's a context of backstory within your injury and the literal walk back to fitness. See that? Now that is a story we're talking about. A burger on a plate may not have a story, unless there's a food photographer about to tell me off otherwise. If so, please do. But your story, as I say, it has literal legs. So great pictures. Right, off to Denmark land. Do you remember I challenged you to go make a picture with your incorrect eye? This is going back a couple of months, about the same time that we were doing the first thing that you see. And one day I said, look, just pick your camera up, take it to your eye, and then stop and put it on the other eye. Does it work as well as the eye that you're used to photographing with? It's a bit like picking up a pen. I mean, when we used to write notes from the boys' soft toys and their teddy bears, we used to write notes from them to Jack and Thomas. If they're, the little things that they like to say to the boy, that sort of magical thing. Oh, look, teddy bear's written to me. Yeah, I know. What has he said? I always used to write with I hope they're not listening. Don't tell them. With my left hand, because I'm right-handed. So the moment I wrote with my left hand, it actually looked like a teddy bear had probably got up and written it himself or herself. So I thought the same. I thought take that one step further, and I challenged you to move the camera across to the eye that you usually don't use. And here goes Jan Erik with a K. As ordered, he said. I took a picture using the wrong eye when you said that I should do. Oh, blimey, that was easy. Just upon one order. I tell you what, here comes another one. Jan Erik, send me all your money. Let's see if that one works as well. Using the wrong eye was something that was very much on my mind some 20 months ago. I've had a lot of problems with my dominant right eye. First, I was very short-sighted, then... Is it vitreous detachment? Vitreous detachment? Oh, blimey. Retinal detachment after that. Several surgeries, 5, 6, 7, I don't remember anymore. But with laser and knives. Oh, now stop. You've got my Achilles heel there, definitely. Oh, which is a weird place to have an eye, I'll grant you that. No, talking about eyes. Oh, that's my big squeamish subject. Everybody has a squeam, don't they? Unless you're a surgeon, you don't have any squeams at all, I'm sure. But that's my squeam. Oh, eyes. Ooh, laser eye surgery. Oh, knives, injections. I'm feeling rather faint. Anyway, in December 2019, it had come to a point in my cataract experience where I saw 3 things of everything, and I had to replace the lens in my right eye. Now, you might have read that my eyesight was perfect at once after replacing the lens. Well, it didn't happen that way to me, and I spent 2 to 2.5 months without seeing much, and this was when I started to think about having to use my left eye for photography. Happily enough, everything turned out fine. And after 2.5 months, I now see better than many years before. Oh, a happy ending to that story. Thank heavens. You deserved it after that many surgeries. So let's see what you shot then, because I printed it out with the so-called wrong eye. Side of a church. Well, everything's in focus for a start. But it does seem to me, Jan, that the building is on a slight lean. Unless you're about to tell me that this place has serious subsidence, in which case I'm saying don't worry about your eyes. Worry about the rest of you now and run quickly. But it was an interesting experiment, and I received a couple of mails about that, and it might be one to try. Just lift your camera now. Look, I'll do it with you, hang on. Lift your camera. Now, I automatically go to my left eye because I'm a left eye shooter, but I'm going to put it to my right. You know, the weirdest thing is I'm finding difficulty shutting my left eye. I always had to close it with my hand then. That does feel weird. Focus, well, definitely I'd have to change the diopter. I mean, I've made a picture, but that would feel very, very strange to me indeed. Be interested to see what your thoughts are on that. So let's go back to chapter 2 now for the concluding part of my conversation with woodland photographer Simon Baxter. And I want to investigate this privacy some photographers find or have for the places they shoot. I talked recently to an Urbex partnership who make these incredible, mainly Nordic pictures of buildings that have been reclaimed by nature. And they often get asked for the locations because they're fascinating places to photograph. And they never say. And neither do you. And there's good reason for that, isn't there?
Yeah, to start with, it was very much, it wasn't selfish because it was what I needed. It was what I needed personally. It wasn't about keeping these places secret so that nobody else could go and make the same photographs that I've made. It was more about, I need solitude. I need to be out on my own in nature. And that was partly wrapped up in the experience of nature, but also I just needed that escape. You know, particularly when I started, everything with the injury, because it was invisible, you kind of feel like a bit of a fraud. And then people were saying to me, you know, well, you look fine and you can go out with your camera. There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that made me quite insular. So I felt as if I needed to just get out into nature and escape and be on my own. And then that kind of made me more introspective, which I think helped with the photography as well. So it was more about, you know, photography isn't a public service. I just needed to find what was, I required from a well-being. So as I started to kind of form this communion with nature and start to learn more about it, and I started to sort of understand the impact of humans upon these places, but also seeing that even my presence could have an impact on somewhere, I thought, wow, you know, and then you start to see stories from places like Iceland where, you know, trails have been absolutely trashed, and Isle of Skye, where even the infrastructure can't deal with the amount of people that they're visiting. And I thought, well, actually, this isn't just about me. It's much, much bigger. And in order to protect what makes these places special, I need to make sure that they're kept secret so they don't have dozens of photographers walking through the understory and affecting what, you know, because there's so few of these places left now, you know, which aren't getting that heavy footfall. There's also, in some ways, you know, the constant message in my YouTube channel is find your own place, find your own little sanctuary, go out there and explore, because there's lots of these little pockets which aren't getting photographed. And it's a sense of fulfillment that you'll get from exploring a woodland, finding a composition, scouting, putting in the time and effort to make the final image work. It's incredibly fulfilling.
Well, you mentioned YouTube just a moment ago, and much like Sean, I promise not to draw too many comparisons because you are your own person, but you're both the most natural YouTubers in a sort of non-natural YouTube world. There's a sense of peace to what you both do. Do you feel like a YouTuber?
No. My relationship with YouTube is a bit of an odd one because it's there as an outlet to communicate and share what's important to me, because it didn't start as something that, you know, as some commercial objective. It was just about the sharing to start with. As it became commercially viable and allowed me to end my other career and start something that was better for my health, then obviously my relationship with YouTube changed, because then there became the pressure. and they need to put content out there to be able to sustain a business. But that can sometimes fly in the face of, what I need from photography. So there's lots and lots of people doing what we do who are putting videos out week in, week out. And I can't do that because I need the time away from it just to go out and enjoy photography without the cameras rolling. So, and I'm so precious about the images that I create. I'm not trying to say that I'm, a great photographer. It's not about that, but the time just to be alone with the camera is still precious. I need that to be able to sustain the passion, to keep the fire burning. And if I don't protect that, then that will start to show in the videos that I make.
Well, I think it is pretty healthy. If you read the comments to the films, it's wonderful to read how inspiring you are to others who've had similar health issues. They talk about introversion. Are you aware of that as you're making your films?
Yeah, and again, I never imagined that. But when I started to receive messages from people saying, I felt alone, I've had similar experiences to you and I didn't know where to turn.
Yeah.
But the fact that, you've been able to turn it into something positive and become happier has been an inspiration for them. And that's the real stuff. That's the thing where you read that and you think, oh my God, this actually matters. This matters, beyond the photography. And that's always kind of what the message has been. It's not just about, oh, here's some photographs that I've made. Just like, look how cool this is. Look how, amazing it is just to be out wandering in the countryside with a dog.
Yeah.
And the joy that, having the company of the dog brings as well. So yeah, and it was a difficult thing to navigate at first because I did feel very introverted at the time. But the big advantage of being on YouTube is that it forces you to sort of mine your own thoughts, to try and to be able to understand how what used to be instinctive and now you're trying to bring to the conscious is the thought processes that you go through as a photographer so you can articulate that. Yeah. I think that going through that process and becoming a bit more confident has helped me to be less introverted.
I'm wondering how this period of COVID affected you with what you like to photograph and where you like to be. I mean, notwithstanding being away from family and all those sort of pressures that this ghastly time has brought. Otherwise, did lockdown really feel like lockdown? I mean, you like to be in nature on your own.
Yeah, it's a real strange one because just before the first lockdown, we moved house and doubled our mortgage.
Oh, God.
And then literally like 3 weeks after we moved, all my workshops were cancelled. I was like, oh my God, this is really bad. So thankfully I was able to adapt and, find, other ways of paying the bills. So once I kind of got that managed, then realized that I had spring to myself, autumn to myself, just to go out and enjoy photography. But also it didn't seem socially acceptable to be making videos either. And I kind of took that as an opportunity. I thought, here's my chance now to spend a whole season just enjoying photography. And it was amazing. Ironically, you would perhaps sort of think my view would be quite, going back to my early years where it's a bit more negative, going through a stressful period and a period of anguish. But I actually started to take more positive images because I went into the woods when we started seeing easing restrictions. All the bluebells were out, the smell of wild garlic, all the songbirds. And it was just phenomenal. It was just a fantastic time to be out in the woods.
There is a consideration for Kit here. We don't talk a lot about Kit on this show. We tend to talk about feelings more, but you do spend a lot of time exploring. We've talked, of course, about your injury. Camera-wise, lens-wise, kit bag-wise, backpack or whatever we want to call it. These are considerations, aren't they? What do you carry?
That's the other thing why I don't want to film too often because it requires carrying more gear.
Yeah.
So the typical day when I'm just out making images is one camera, one lens, 24 to 70 mil.
Is that the one lens you take out?
That's what I use for 99.9% of my local photography.
Wow.
I will carry a 70 to 200 if I'm somewhere like Scotland where the landscape is everything's just bigger.
Yeah.
But yeah, that stays on the camera almost exclusively. So that's in the bag with a bottle of water, a waterproof jacket, and literally that's it.
Yeah.
Like I want to keep the backpack as light as possible. But the one thing that I won't compromise on is the tripod.
Yeah.
When it comes to things that really matter and actually make a difference to the workflow and the images that I make, the tripod and the head, that's really important to me.
So what are they? What do you take with you?
I have Gitso tripod, which is 204 centimeters, so just over 2 meters high. It's big. Yeah. It's a bit of a beast with big spikes on the bottom. And then the head is an Arca Swiss cube, which is a geared head. It's quite compact, actually, but quite heavy. But having that very fine adjustment for compositions in woodland is, there's no turning back. It's like when you use an L bracket for the first time in landscape photography. There's no turning back. Now with this geared head, it's a very, very expensive piece of kit, but it genuinely makes a difference. And that's the only time I care about gear. If it makes a difference to the workflow, then I care about it. Other than that, I'm not bothered.
So all the shots that you make, they're generally on a tripod. They're never really free held or?
Very, very rarely. Right. Very rarely, yeah.
Well, you mentioned your courses. I know that prints are available on your website as well. Well, there's a book coming out.
Oh, yeah. First book.
And we have to mention that. It's in time for Christmas 2021, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm hoping to have copies delivered here in November.
Gathering Time seems perfect for you, actually, when you think about the process you go through.
Yeah, it's the title kind of makes a bit more sense when you read the book as well, because I've put quite a bit of writing into it rather than just the pictures. Ever since I made, going back to that image of the spooky tree in the pine plantation, and the photograph is called Afraid of Time.
Yeah.
I explain why it's called Afraid of Time in the book, and I've explained it in a video before as well, actually. But that's what started these kind of cursory references to time and a kind of fascination with it. You know, like I say, referring to oak trees as observers of time. You know, the feeling of that time collects when you're in woodland. I was speaking to my friend Joe Cornish, and I was sort of explaining this and my kind of fascination with time. And then we started to sort of think about words rather than collect, because he's very keen on language. And the words that we use around photography are very, very important to him. So he hates words like snap and take.
Yes.
So a slightly kind of softer word than collect is gather. So yeah, I just like that. And like I said, the things that have happened and what trees have been witnessed to through time, and the fact that we're gathering moments in time as photographers, that's the kind of idea behind it.
Just finally, I do want to talk about Meg. I tried to steer clear of Meg a bit because I know that Meg can take over the films sometimes. And
steal the show, yeah.
Steal the show. But she does almost feel like, and excuse me if I sound like I'm going a bit woo-woo here, but she does almost feel like your spiritual guide. She's definitely part of the films and your love of nature. I get the feeling that she's sometimes saying, "Come on, Simon, there's a better view down here. Let's come this way." Or is she a patient dog? I would imagine she has to be, because she spends so long photographing with you and observing what you do. She sits down and watches you. I've seen her do it.
Yeah. Do you know what? I could burst with pride when I look at Meg.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, I get these moments when I just think about when the time comes when she's not. I mean, I try not to think about it, but those thoughts pass my mind when she's not here anymore, and I can't imagine it. I can't imagine it, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be doing this now. Because I'm trying to imagine how would I've got back into photography? You know, how would have I gone on that journey to rediscovering nature and the landscape? I don't see how it would have panned out. So I just feel as if she's been the kind of catalyst for everything positive that's happened over the past sort of several years. So just being with her, you know, it's a powerful thing actually to have something that makes you laugh or smile every single day. So you can go into the woods and you can be having a bad day, and you know, you're feeling grumpy or you're quite sore and in pain, but it's guaranteed all that just is switched off when you turn around and she's on a belly with her legs sprawled out to the back and her tongue hanging out and the head full back and just dragging herself down the hillside. I'm like, what is going through your head? It's absolutely hilarious. And she goes into the water. She's a true water baby. And she goes in, and people have commented on videos before and said, is she trying to catch fish? It's like, no, she literally smacks the water with a paw so she can then catch the splash with her mouth.
Oh.
And she does it over and over and over again. It's kind of odd, and I love it. I love the fact that you've got this just crazy character with such panache running around in the woods, loving life. And then I'm there just like, right, I just need to twist this knob on my geared head, just this tiny bit, and everything's sort of very slow, considered, and contemplative. And then complete contrast to her going nuts next to me. And I love that combination.
Do you think she minds not being the muse anymore? She's like, well, hang on a minute, where's my pictures?
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed now she's not jumping around quite as much. Yeah. And then you go out and you do a film and been out for 5 hours. And then the next day she's just crashed out. Yeah. But no, yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, amazing. I think probably every dog owner says this, but she's one of a kind. One of a kind.
My thanks to Simon Baxter for joining me this week. If I was legally able to use the music from Turner and Hooch, or place another love story between man and dog here, I would. What a joy to talk to Simon and hear about the star Meg, who you will see in his YouTube videos. And of course, I'll place some links to those in the show page today. So what have we learned this week then? Well, I've learned to have far more appreciation for the woodland around me and to respect it. I think I always did respect it. But certainly hearing Simon talk about leaving his own footprint and being aware of his own impact on the world around him, I thought that was an interesting, fascinating way to think about it. And I've learned, of course, that if I want to get more than my sketchbook pictures, that I may have to think about lugging a tripod around and slowing right down. We talked street. It was great, wasn't it, to hear from Gabrielle Matola about talking to those you make pictures of, accepting no, sometimes gracefully, but still having a conversation with those that you showed interest in the first place. I thought that was a very good tip. It was great to hear from Finn Beals as well, wasn't it? Suggesting that, now and then we turn the app off and we envelop ourselves in what's around us in real time. We talked about opening up a love for photography again, and how our changing relationship with social media is finding this sort of more authentic nature. Matt Searles, wonderful to hear from Matt as he makes those majestic journeys on the mail run. What would the adverts say? If Carlsberg did mail runs, could be a bit British, that one. I'm not sure if you had the Carlsberg beer adverts, but you'll smile if you've seen those adverts. And we had to issue a yellow card today, but everything was okay. We all made up in the bar after the match. And Simon Baxter, well, what a guest. All guests are wonderful to talk with, of course, but I feel a real sense of calm after today's conversation. A real sense. So what shall we play out with? Well, I'm going to choose John Lingard this week with a song called Forest for the Trees, which is not really about woodland and trees and forests, and I did think, no, Neil, don't do that. Far too obvious. That's the kind of song that local television news editors would find. But listening to Simon speak today and hearing him talk about opening your eyes and understanding what you see and seeing, if you will, the woods for the trees to slightly tailor an expression for my own purposes, I thought the sentiment seemed right. So here's John Lingard.
Bright lights, late night.
John Lingard, Forest for the Trees, and that's it for this week. All the music and songs I use are on artlist.io, and if you're a photographer or filmmaker, for one fee per year you have unlimited musical use for personal or commercial picture and filmmaking from a library of the most amazing music. There's a link on the PD website. Go to all the W's, photographydaily.show. My thanks to our guest Simon Baxter and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website, photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow we're going to find out what kind of photographer we should be. And I find out if I'm really in the right job. Next week, a photographer with 35 years of experience and a mentor for well over a decade now with, I've heard, and something that intrigues me, his own mobile darkroom, which is kind of my travelling on the road dream. It's Keith Moss, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time. Well, that was nice, wasn't it, Carl? Spending some time in the woods today, in the woodland. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that. Very peaceful. I know. Autumn will be here soon. All the leaves are going to fall, so I thought we should do a woodland walk while we still had the leaves on the trees, and the fact that we had Simon Baxter as well. Not with his dog Meg, but it'd be nice to meet Meg, wouldn't it? Well, as long as she doesn't get in the car with muddy paw prints. Oh, Carl, don't be so miserable. Well, I just know the winter's coming and I'm going to get muddy again, just like last year. Yeah, we did have some real muddy journeys last year, didn't we? This year I'm having a rule. All right, what's that? Boots for walking, shoes for driving. Oh, okay. Simple as, no argument. Oh, right. Well, I'll try to remember that and behave myself. Just make sure you do. Okay, can we go home now?
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.